Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Muslim CEO show. Our vision is Muslims leading the way in solving the world's biggest problems. So this is the perfect place for you if you want to become an amazing leader and grow your business or organization to the next level. We do this by learning from those that have been there, done it and got the thobe. I'm your brother and host Mohammad Arshad, and today I'm truly honored to have with me the amazing Zafarul Noordin. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem, it's my pleasure. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, doing good over here in Malaysia. Hot and rainy.
That's how I remember Malaysia, actually. I'm really excited to have you on the show, bro, because you've been part of some really, really unique entrepreneurial projects, right? And I think that it's actually very weird to find someone like you who's been through some of the experiences. So I'm really, really looking forward to getting into all of that, inshallah. But just before we start, so for those of you that don't know Zafarul, let me give you a quick introduction, right? So Zafarul is the CEO and founder of Andalus Adventures. He's known as the face of lean startup in Asia, and he's been building companies since his college days. He's been the founder of multi-million dollar agency, been chosen as a preferred partner by Microsoft and Stanford, and has helped multiple countries build up their local startup ecosystems, as well as launch National Accelerator Programs. So there's so many things in there, and I can't wait to get into it. But I want to start with the question that I ask everyone, Zafrul, right? Which is,
Yeah,
what
sure.
was 10-year-old Zafrul like?
10-year-old Zafarul, eh? So, I mean, there's this interesting story that my sisters told me of how I was very entrepreneurial even back then, you know. So, I was always, thinking about, okay, how do I make some money, right? So I used to I used to um, kind of like take my all my sister's magazines and everything like that, and I will cut them up into cut up all the interesting pictures, right? Put them into another sketchbook and sell it off to my friends, right?
No way.
So
Wow.
so yeah, so my sisters will get annoyed and they're like, "What's wrong? What happened to my magazines? Why is it full of holes?" And I think little brother is making a business out of the magazines, right? So yeah.
Amazing. So that means like you were very entrepreneurial, like yeah, at a young age, right?
Yeah, I was entrepreneur at a young age. For example, when I was young, I loved comic books, and my sister was in the US, right? So I found a way to kind of like undercut even the comic stores in KL. So I'm like, my
Okay.
sister like she comes back like, "Okay, I want you to buy 100 of these comic books," and I would like get the comic books, sit right in front of the store, right? And tell the people, hey, you know what? I can sell this to you cheaper, right? So I used to be like that, and
So
and I used to love tech as well. I used to love computers and tech. So even I mean not as young as 10 years old, but maybe as young as maybe 13, I used to pull apart the PC, right,
mm,
back then, and then I used to kind of fix it up. So like okay, I kind of pull apart, fix it, right. So I used to kind of be entrepreneurial, and I used to like all these tech gadgets, games,
and and
that.
and it's quite surprising actually because like not only were you entrepreneurial, but you were actually resourceful as well, right? Because you were taking the magazines and doing all of that. What I wanted to ask you that where did that kind of come from? Because not a lot of people are like that at that age.
I really don't know. This is an interesting question, and I think same again. My sister, many years down the road, right? When she was doing her MBA, and one of her thesis was one of her research was that what is it that gets entrepreneurs to do what they do, right? Because it's like no one tells you, right? No one tells you to take a leap and there's a cliff. All right, I'm going to run off and leap off it and figure out how am I going to land safely, right? So and yeah, I mean it just clicks. No one really told me anything. I can or maybe someone did or something happened, but yeah, it just came naturally and. You know, you just I used to be I always used to spot opportunities, right? And like, hey, this is something that I can do, and yeah, just do it. And then my sister said that same thing. Actually, she researched a couple of entrepreneurs, and he said something about you guys entrepreneurs. Just do it, right? No one tells you to do it. You just like, okay, I see it. All right, let's get it done.
Amazing. And do you feel that like there were people who are like family members or stuff like generally that are into business, or does your family usually like just have normal jobs, or like what's the structure? Because I'm trying to figure out where it comes from, you know?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, my dad. He generally was a corporate man, right? He worked, but he had a different thinking process, right? So he used to read a lot of books, and I think he traveled. I mean, his work brought him to travel a lot, and I used to follow him, I guess, when I was a young kid. So maybe that kind of environment, or that kind of upbringing kind of like opened my mind with regards to entrepreneurship. But yeah, I even remember that I had a neighbor, and he was doing very well, right? He had a big house and a swimming pool. I was like, oh, this is cool. I want, So what did you do? And I said, oh yeah, I do this X Y Z. I have an island. I'm like, you have an island? So
Wow.
immediately, yeah. So it was. I guess if you ask me, maybe it was bits and pieces of small interactions with people, right? Things that you get exposed to, conversations that you have with certain people, and I wouldn't say it's one single thing, but maybe it was just many things that come together, that kind of shapes your thinking process, and your character.
I think like it's amazing because like when we go deeper into your journey, we're going to see all the parts where entrepreneurship kind of comes in your life. I know Andalus Ventures is like a huge thing that you guys are working on right now. We're going to talk a lot about that. But just talk me through your journey from being that kind of young child who's into entrepreneurship to actually like now today Andalus Ventures. Just talk me through the journey.
Yeah, I think maybe like I said, I was always big on entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial. I even didn't know the word entrepreneurship when I was younger. I was like, okay, I wanted to start a business, right? And I think it started when I was in uni, and it was back then, it was like the dot-com craze, and I had an offer and opportunity to kind of like drop out of university. So I think someone, family, relative uncle offered me about 200,000 ringgit, right, to start a IT business. Right? So I was like, okay, stay in uni, no money, no food, right? 200,000, right? No brainer. So I kind of like jumped out of uni. I started, it was my first company, ended up to be a digital agency, right? Back then, and we built it from a bedroom to boardroom. So it became a multi-million dollar
Wow.
digital agency. And alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah, we worked with some really great clients, some of the biggest companies in Malaysia. And then I think fast forward, I did that for about 10 years. And then at the same time, I've always looked at startups, Silicon Valley. I actually helped a couple of friends of mine launch their startups, and based in Silicon Valley. And the question was like, hey Zaf, when's your turn, right? When are you going to do something? So I kind of transitioned out of an IT digital agency IT company into the startup world in maybe 2010, 2011. And the opportunity came because there was a very good, there was an amazing pioneering initiative by the government to transform our economy nationwide. So they went and they looked for thousands of companies, and then they just, I guess, filtered it down to maybe 30 to 50 companies to transform the economy. We were one of the companies that was selected, right? So back then we were like, okay, this is, basically country said, okay, build up your startup, build up startups here, build up the startup ecosystem, launch something in the States and everything. So that was our kind of move to go from national, I would say national market, to building a startup for a global market. And that's where my first startup, Code Army, launched, right? So I think, and yeah, it was a big launch. We launched in Silicon Valley and everything, had great reviews, and we approached Stanford University and Microsoft and a couple more companies in the US, and we said, we have this amazing project, which is collaboration with the country and private sector, and they thought it was amazing. They haven't seen it, right? So we partnered with them and whatnot. So yeah, it was an interesting journey, but at the same time, also a very humbling journey. I learned a lot, stumbled a lot, failed a lot, right? Burned a lot of cash, and along that journey, the people from Stanford say, "Hey, have you heard of this thing called lean startup, right? This lean startup methodology and everything like that." And I said, "What's that?" Right? And they said, "Yeah, this is a process, and this is a methodology in how you actually, how Silicon Valley builds startups, right?" So I'm like, "Oh, all right." So when I read the book and I read all the mistakes that people make, I'm like, I made,
That's
you
what
know,
I've been doing.
that's what I've been doing. The mistake one, two, three,
Yeah,
four, five. I'm like,
yeah.
oh my God, right? I was like, I wish someone would have told me this, right? And I felt the pain because, to be honest, alhamdulillah, we were blessed with, some risk. We made. I'm a typical example of made millions, lost millions, right? So,
Yeah.
right. So what after learning that methodology, right? And I said, hey, okay, this is something that I was passionate about, and I said I wanted to help other future entrepreneurs not go through the same mistakes and not feel the anguish of losing a lot of money that you've built over years, right? And I said, okay. I think in 2014 we said, okay, when we, let's do a kind of like a community workshop, lean startup workshop for the community back in Malaysia, and share this and bring this to other budding entrepreneurs, right? So I think fast forward, we did one, had great reaction, great media coverage, and the community was like, "Hey, Zaf, you're doing only one? You can't just do one and leave. You gotta like continue it." And we continued, and then okay, we'll do another one, and we'll do another one, and we'll do another one, right? And then I would say that so
Can I just ask you one
the
thing? I just wanted to ask you one
yeah.
thing. So, you mentioned that like you work with Stanford, Microsoft, all these kind of guys. You approach them. So you were actually in the US at that time, or you were working from Malaysia and doing it?
No, I was yeah. So interestingly, I was going back and forth to the US, right?
Okay.
So the Malaysian passport is pretty good. Wherever you go, you get a number of months that you can stay.
Wow. Okay.
Our visa is quite is I would say it's quite handy, right? So I would go and come back, right?
So when you
Uh,
when you when you were going there, like, so that means you physically really spent time in Silicon Valley, yeah?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so just tell us, like me and the people watching, like, what's it like being in that environment as a Muslim, and how is it like, because we see movies about it, we see like the series and stuff. Like, what's it really like there, and what's it like being a Muslim there?
Yeah, so I mean, if you are in Silicon Valley, I mean, I watch Silicon Valley for HBO and I kind of giggle. I mean, I have good laugh at it because I know a lot of it is quite true, right? Obviously, it's made for entertainment, like entertainment value, so but a lot of it is quite true. But being in Silicon Valley, the one thing I think being in San Francisco, right, Bay Area, it's I mean, it's a melting pot of a lot of cultures and religions and whatnot. So everyone kind of respects you as a Muslim. I mean, this was back in 2012 and 13 maybe, right? So I didn't really have much problems and challenges really, you know, being a Muslim. Obviously, it's not Islamic culture. I mean, you have all the other, it's a normal American culture, right? And I mean, I found it uh, okay to practice my religion as well. And interestingly, as I travel quite a bit, I went to other ecosystems, I went to other countries, parts of Europe, in the coming years. And I have always reached out for the local mosque or the musalla, right? Just to kind of check it out, like what's the local community like. Always try to catch Salatul Jumaat, right? Just to find out how everyone's doing it. And I think when I was in I think the Bay Area, I mean, for me in Malaysia, right, you don't have any problems with masjid. Every corner you go, there's a masjid, right? Like, but I remember in San Francisco when the Salatul Jumaat, there's like three different three different slots because the musalla can't cater, right? So it's like you want a khutbah at 12 or khutbah at 12:30 or the khutbah at 1. I'm like, really? There's something like
Yeah.
that, right? So those are all kind of new experiences, but alhamdulillah, I obviously, I had friends from Malaysia that were in there, so I kind of like they stayed with them and they brought me around, and halal food was, I mean, in San Francisco, halal food is pretty easy to find anyway, right? Yeah, so I don't know how it would have felt in other parts of the US, but I think just in Silicon Valley, you know, it was, I mean, somewhat easier to kind of practice
And in the
views.
US, did you find that there was a lot of Muslims involved in the whole startup scene, the whole Silicon Valley, or were there very few?
No, no, no. They were. I didn't find that many, to be honest, right? Maybe I didn't go enough much around, right? But I didn't find that many. Obviously, I met some, but I think not not that many that I can remember. A lot of friends that were Jewish, right? And they kind of also respect and also kind of also understand the sensitivity between Muslims and Jews, right? So, but generally, quite cool about it, quite respectful, right? I
Yeah,
had
I
a
think
lot
I
of
think
Jewish, yeah,
I think the
yeah,
Americans generally are very good like that. Like they're very open to other cultures. They're used to like
yeah.
normal American culture. So I think that's wonderful. I mean, like you were saying that. So then you kind of discovered this whole lean startup thing. So tell me, how did it go from you just reading the book and learning about it to you actually becoming like the man for it in Asia?
Yeah. So I think what we did was the first thing we did was we took the Code Army idea and we relaunched it in UK, right? So I was then going back between US, UK, and Malaysia, and then we applied it, and then we got traction, and it started to gain we started to get traction, and we're like, oh, okay, this is how it's done, and we start, it's going to get successful, and then we're like, okay, with a bit of success, we started to, and then 2014 or something, we did our first community workshop back in KL, because I came back to Malaysia actually to sort out our funding issue, right, to meet our funders and everything like that, and right, it was like a progress update, and I said, okay, while we're there for 1 or 2 months, we'll do this workshop, and it just kind of grew. We did one workshop, and we did the other workshop, and we did the next workshop, right? And I think the turning point was that there was a person from our sovereign wealth fund that said, hey, I mean, I think he spent some time in the US, but not in San Francisco. He was from Boston, right? So he knew all this startup stuff, and I guess he also he heard about lean startup, and when he found out there was a Malaysian doing lean startup, he's like, okay, could you bring lean startup into corporate Malaysia, right? Because the sovereign wealth fund, obviously they invested into probably the biggest companies in Malaysia, right? They own shares. So can you bring lean startup into these companies? And I think that was our pivoting point, right? We were like, oh man, we're just getting traction in UK with our Code Army platform and everything like that. But this is really a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? It's not every day someone knocks at your door and say, hey, you know what? I'm giving you access to, uh, you know, you know, a dozen billion-dollar companies, right?
So
So
just to
it
clarify, like for those people that don't know what a sovereign wealth fund is, like can you just explain, give us an overview of what is it?
Yeah, so it's basically when the country wants to invest into any private into companies, right? So they set up this fund, right? And they invest in, and they own companies through this particular fund. So I think Singapore has a sovereign wealth fund as well, and Brunei has a sovereign. Every country that I think I know has some sort of sovereign wealth fund, right? So basically, it's
So basically,
government owning.
yeah,
Yeah.
government. So you were working on the Code Army thing in London, but obviously now that the wealth fund, the government of your country has come and said, why don't you come to these top companies in Malaysia and help us implement this? So you were like, that's
Yeah.
it. This is great. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think at that time we said this. We said, okay, this is a great opportunity. I think we should explore it, right? But all right, we're not giving up on our Code Army ideology, right? Because we're getting traction, and then the people, customers in UK are buzzing us and everything like that. But we said, never mind, never mind. We'll put Code Army on the back burner for 6 months, right? And let's pursue this opportunity. So, and obviously that 6 months became 9 months, and it became
Yeah.
a year. And, next thing you know, it like, okay, man, this has been on the back burner for 2 years. And we've lost traction, right? Like no one's going to wait around for you for that long. And obviously, the initiative with the sovereign wealth fund picked up steam, and yeah, so we that then because we started to apply it in corporate Malaysia, right, with large companies. So the Americans also say, hey, how did you do it for your country, right? You really brought lean startup the workshop to a new level, and then say, hey, take care of the whole country, right? And at that time, just so happened there was the the uh, um, the lean startup workshop guys. They had a guy from Singapore who was kind of doing the entire region, taking care of region, because lean startup was the head office was in New York, right? The workshop was in New York. So obviously coming to you from US to Asia was a big cost. So there was a Singapore guy doing it, and just so happens at that time the Singaporean guy went off to do his startup, and there was a void. Like, okay, there's no one looking at the region, so they kind of tried it out. Like, hey, Zafarul, do you want to look after the entire region?
Yes.
So yeah, I'm like, how many countries? And then we said, I just said, okay, I just want to do ASEAN, right? I just want to do ASEAN 10 countries, right? And at that time, I had team members, and one of it was from Maldives, and they said, Zaf, can you even do Maldives? And I'm like, do you mean that the Maldivians are going to pay me to go to Maldives? I'm like, sure. So we put in a few more countries in it. So ended up we decided to take care of 14 countries, to be honest, right?
Wow. So just to clarify, like the book Lean Startup, like those guys made you the main guy who was basically authorized to implement this in all of these countries.
Yeah. So the guy who wrote the book licensed a workshop to another guy, right? So and the workshop guys actually licensed us 14 countries to kind of do this workshop in
Amazing.
14 countries.
So
Yeah.
tell
So
me, tell me, tell
yeah.
me some of the stuff that you were doing, because so I get it that you were working all these countries, that the Sovereign Wealth Fund was there, but practically, like concretely, like what were you actually doing?
Yeah, generally we because I mean the lean startup is, I mean, it's theoretically it's very easy to understand, but what we found out that practically to implement it is very hard. That's the challenging part, right? So the hard part is when, okay, when you read the book, I'm like, oh, they made it so easy. It's like, okay, I get it, right? But then when you do it is when you run into a lot of problems. And we were coaching people how to actually implement it. How, for example, if you wanted to start a startup, okay, this is your steps, right? Step 1 to step 10. And sometimes even implementing step 1, for example, okay, I'm going to do customer interviews, right? Even executing customer interviews, people stumble, right? So we're like, okay, now we go in, we coach them how to do customer interviews, right? We listen to how they do it, we give feedback, we correct them, and okay, get out, right, and get the learnings from those customer interviews, yeah, and then understand, okay, what should I do now? Should I pivot? Should I not? Things like that, yeah. So yeah,
So
generally, I was, yeah, sorry.
I want you to ask, like, give us an overview of first of all, why do we need a methodology when it comes to startups, and what is the Lean Startup methodology? What it's generally about? What is it saying?
Yeah. So I think generally, if I were to, a lot of people ask me this question, right? And you see, when you start a startup, there's or any kind of business, you basically have two modes, right? And what we are taught in school with MBA courses and everything, right, is how to run an existing business. And those businesses are in execution mode, right? So businesses are running, they have, obviously you have operations and they have the products and services, right? But when you're doing a startup, you're in search mode. You're searching for everything. You're searching for who's my customer. You're searching for what's my price point. You're searching for what's my product. You're searching for what's my value proposition. You're searching for so many things. Anyone that has starting a business will understand, like, okay, when people say, so, what's your price point? Oh no, we're just testing the market and we're just trying to see whether people want to have feedback. They actually don't know how much to charge, right? They don't know how much to cost, how much to charge. So the lean startup actually gets you into search mode, right? How do you actually search for all these things? And when you're in search mode, you are in, you are in a state of uncertainty. You're working in an environment where nothing's certain, right? And the lean startup puts a process in terms of how you uncover, bit by bit of your business, and to know whether or not it is a business before you actually go into execution mode, right? So and the one thing that I also talk about the lean startup that it does very well, right, is something called customer development, right? So I think a lot of processes like hackathons and things like that help you do product development, but we've never really learned customer development. How do you develop customers, right? And the lean startup actually has a high focus on actual customer development, right? Customer first. So it's almost like, and in the programs that we run, right? So we've run a couple of programs. So we run short workshops and we run even longer, 3-4 months accelerators and pre-accelerators. And what we teach the mantra that we teach is that don't build your product first. Go out and develop your customers first, right? So even before you even think about your product, you've already got like a handful of customers that are, that have this problem, that want you to solve the problem, and kind of like waiting for what solution that you come up with, right? So a lot of lean startup brings that forward, the customer development forward, and which is not normal, which is not something that we are used to, because we're used to, I don't know whether the entrepreneurs that you train, how many of the entrepreneurs come out and say, hey, I got a great idea, I need to be a funding, I need to build my products first, I need to be my marketing, kit, and then I'm going to launch it, right? But the lean startup says, okay, you have an idea, you go to market in 3 days. Everyone goes, how am I going to go to market in 3 days, right? It's impossible. And in our workshop, that's one of the things that we teach. Like from idea, you go to market, get some first customers, and maybe even get some pre-orders in less than 3 days, right? So it is a completely mindset shift, and it's those methodologies, tools that equip you to do these things, like to launch a business and to focus on customer development first. So
Yeah, I think it's a
yeah,
wonderful thing,
yeah.
bro. You said there. It's really important because I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs who they have this idea, they fall in love with the idea, and then they fall in love with the idea of getting funded for that idea, and then they just basically do nothing with it. I remember speaking to this one sister who had this really amazing idea, right? And I'm like, okay, this is a fantastic idea. I love it. I really think it can work. Okay, great. Like, tell me how many have you sold? And she's like, no, I'm looking for funding. I'm like, hold on, you're looking for funding. How much would it cost for you to make one of these products? Probably about £20. I'm like, so why haven't you made like 10 products and gone and sold them? Oh no, I'm waiting for
Mm.
funding. I'm like, what is going on here? So I think like having that methodology, like where you go to market quick, because then it's that whole thing where if it fails, you fail fast and you get up and you go again, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's like really, really great thinking. And us personally, like within our own Muslim CEO, this is what we do. Like before we started the current program that we offer, before we built it, because building it took months for us. Before we built it, we
Correct.
went out and we said, right, this is our idea. This is what we want to do. Do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy
Mm.
this? And then people came back and said, I will buy it. Here's the money. I will buy it. Here's the money. And we were like, okay, good. We know this will sell. We know this is valuable. It solves a problem. Now let's go and build it. So it's that type of
Correct.
kind of mentality. And I think it's really, really important to kind of do that. And so how do you kind of how do you advise someone does that? Where like I might be that sister I'm talking about who's got a great idea, could really work. I'm thinking, look, I need some significant cash to do this properly. Like, how do I actually turn that idea into something within a week? I do it.
Yeah. So I think like for us, so what I do is that we've got some very short workshops, like 2.5 days, right? It is the Lean Startup Machine workshop. It's the flagship workshop that we carry across the region. So and we've always said that the Lean Startup Machine workshop is the arrowhead of the Lean Startup movement, right? And it's designed to give you this, I guess, mindset shift among things. And because you're in a group environment and you're put into groups of 3 to 5, so you are trying out this new process, right? New method, new thinking, new way of doing things within the group. And then because you've gone through it and you've seen it, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, now I think maybe I can have a different approach. So that is, I think, generally what we do. And then what we have done, what we did for our Sovereign Wealth Fund is that we actually designed a 4-month program where they actually follow through the entire process and actually get a full working startup, right? And funded by the end of the fourth month, right? So, and to get funded, basically, if you move backwards, to get funded, you need customers, right? And to get customers, you need kind of a product. So we teach them, okay, how do you build a minimum viable product, right? How do you build a minimum viable product to get your first 10 customers, to show a potential investor that, hey, I'm solving a problem. I think there's a market. I've managed to put together a minimum viable product, and I managed to convince 10 customers or so to kind of buy this product or use this product, right? So we have all the techniques in terms of that, and our program that we built together with the Sovereign Wealth Fund got these startups to the point where they had MVPs, customers, even get the first check with zero investment. So we wanted to show that this process or this methodology could work, right? And it's just the founders had to put in sweat equity, right? They had to put in sweat equity. They had to pick up new skills, and they had to execute it. But it was zero funding. It was zero funding. So that was I think our real testament in terms of how we've managed to take this methodology. We've tried it ourselves on Code Army in the UK, teach it in a short workshop to the community, and then take a selected few, run them through a full 4 months pre-accelerator, get them from idea to first check, right? With zero investment, but giving them new skill sets, right? Give them entrepreneurial skill sets, real practical know-how and knowledge in terms of how do you actually build a startup from scratch. Right?
So what are some of the skill sets? Because this is very interesting, right? Like we talked about you being very resourceful at the start of your life and stuff, right? So when you look at startups and you look at founders and you look at these teams, like what are the skills that founders and startup teams really need to build within themselves?
Okay, so the first skill that founders need to build or startup teams need to build is the ability to extract insights from customers, right? And you do that by doing great customer interviews. And I say customer interview, it sounds like, okay, I just go out and talk to customers, right? The skill of asking the right questions is such a undervalued skill, and it's such a skill that is non-existent in a lot of teams, right? A lot of teams fail, like they don't know how to go and talk to people. They don't know how to even extract information and insights, because you need to extract insights, right? I think I had I had this great mentor or coach as well that I bring into our programs from Australia. A lot of people ask me, why can't I just do surveys? Why can't I just do focus groups? I can get information out like that. He said, no, you do customer interviews because you want to find out secrets from the customer. What is it? What is he not telling you? Or what's his real behavior like, right? So you need to draw out secrets. And to do that, you need to look at body language. You need to see how they're answering. You need to dig deeper. You need to ask follow-up questions, right? It's almost like you're almost like a detective, right? So you need to find out, is this guy lying to me? Is this guy telling me the truth? How do I get into corporate, right? So that's the first skill. The second skill is that to creatively think about how can you build something called minimum viable products, right? With all the tools and technology that you have. So for example, in Code Army, when we launched the Code Army platform in UK, right, we tested 90 online apps, right? And we hacked it and mashed it together, and we put it out there, and it looked like a fully functional app, right? But yeah, very creative. I mean, you use all sort of creative stuff, like you use Woofu forms for payments, you use Google Docs for this, you use website builders for that, you use Zapier for connecting, all that kind of stuff. So you got to be very resourceful in terms of how you build MVPs, right? And you can seem like you can serve a small number of customers, right? So and you have to be very creative in how you come up with minimum viable products. I've given talks to I've given a lot of talks, in this region, and I can tell you, I do it all the time, right? I say, okay, I'm on stage right now. You pitch to me your idea. I guarantee you, 90% of all of you in audience right now, 90% of all your ideas, we can MVP it and we can launch in 2 days, right? And generally, that's what comes out. yeah, some 10% you can't MVP. You know, if it's a very highly technical product, maybe it's hard to kind of MVP it. But generally, if you're creative enough, you can MVP. And I like this technique called the concierge MVP. Means that you are almost, you know, either call it people call it Wizard of Oz, or people call it concierge, right? Then you know you can you know, they say fake it till you make it, right? So it looks like a fully functional app, but in the background you're supporting it with a lot of manual stuff, right? And yeah, I love that technique. I teach it to all my teams, especially in a pre-accelerator, in a longer program. And that's how they get their customers. They concierge everything, right? They Wizard of Oz at the front. It looks like a technical, you know, fully functional app, but you know, there's a lot of concierge at the back, right, to deliver the service or the experience. So I think these are the two skills that any early stage founder needs to pick up, right? Ability to really interview, get customer insights, and the ability to creatively figure out, you know, minimum viable products and launch it to your
Sure.
first early customers.
I really love that thing you said about questions, about being a detective, because a lot of the times when I've helped people start businesses and stuff, I've done customer interviews. Even customers that I've served, you know, as an agency, I used to interview the customer of my customer, right? And I
Right.
would
Yeah.
literally, I would grill them, like I would go so deep, type of thing. So I love that whole questioning. What I want to ask you is that one of the big messages you're pushing out today is you're saying that, look, if you have an idea, within 3, 4, 5 days, like you could get moving with that idea, do the most minimum viable kind of version of it and get moving. Okay. So that's great. And anyone listening to this, 90% of the people watching this should be going, that's me. How do I do that? Right. And once you open your mind to how am I going to do that if I had to, it really opens up anyway. Right. But what I want to ask you is, let's say I do that, like in a week, I actually get this stuff together and I get moving on it. How do I know, or when do I know that the concept is actually proven, like this has legs? Like, is there a number of sales? Is there a value to it? Like, how do I know now that I've started getting a bit of traction that this could actually be something really, really big and viable?
Yeah. So I think, you know, it's obviously different for different businesses, right? So what we do normally is, depending on what's the business that you're in. So for example, if you're planning to do an e-commerce platform and you wanted to sell certain products, so you say, okay, you know, I know if I am able to convince people to buy 10 products and they come back and they buy, you know, in, you know, repeatedly 3 times or something. So I know, hey, you know what, I've got some kind of like match here, right? So I would say that, you know, it differs from startup to startup, right? But you can have a general sense of some, you know, kind of indicator that this is a good indicator. So in our programs, like for example, I'm thinking about, okay, so one startup, very famous now in Malaysia, right? They have a franchise of burger, they have a franchise of a burger shop, right? It's called My Burger Labs, right? So LSM, you know, lean startup alumni, and for him, I think they experimented. You know, he rented a restaurant that was not used in the evenings, and for him, he said, okay, if you know, if I ask my friends and family to come and try my food, they will, because they're friends and family, right? But I want them to come back. I want them to return and buy my burgers 7 times, for example, right? So, you know, you can be friends. If your burger sucks, you know, I'm not going to come back and buy your burger
Yeah,
seven
yeah.
times, right? Right. So that's one example, right? So, so yeah, so that was one example. So another example that also a friend of mine, he runs this, you know, on-demand battery replacement, car battery replacement. So if your car gets stranded out in the street, make a call, right? Things like that. So he had a very interesting. He wanted to test the market, right? So what he did was that he spent like less than just a few hundred ringgit, right? That's like maybe 20 pounds or something. Put up this ad, right? In, you know, his product's ad in, I think, Google or something, and say, okay, battery dead, call me, right? So and what he did was, people calling him, right? People started calling him, and he just wanted to say, okay, if I get 100 calls a day, I know I'm onto something,
Yes.
right? But he didn't have any batteries at that time, right? He didn't have any batteries. So what he did was, oh, sorry, our batteries run out. out of
Yeah, I have
batteries,
no
right?
batteries.
We're out of batteries. We're out of batteries. So after a while, we're like, okay, I have just lost so much business, and CC immediately, okay, I'm going to go and find some guys who do this on the side, repair batteries, and I'm going to have some agreement with them or not. So yeah, so you can set, again, for every business you have, you can set what's my threshold. If I see this number happening, right, it kind of validates my hypothesis of what's my market size, so that, obviously it's very easy to get in, to fall in love with market data. You go on Google, you market everything, you research everything points that it's $1 billion opportunity, and everyone just
Yeah.
say, oh, if I get 1%, I just need 1% of this $1 billion opportunity, right? And
Yeah.
it's $100 million a year, right? And I always tell the startups that come through our program to say, okay, you can get 100 million, get me 10 customers first. Go out and find 10 customers, right? Don't talk about 100 million, right? So if you can't find 10, then that's a big problem. Yeah. So
Yeah. Okay,
yeah,
wonderful. I love those suggestions. And I think you're right. Like, you need to look at your industry, you need to make the hypothesis based on that, and then obviously go further. So that's great. Another big thing that I know you're an expert in different fields, right? One thing that I'm really interested in about you and your expertise is innovation, right? Because I know you guys have done a lot of work on how to innovate and this and that. So just tell me like a little bit about like what is innovation, why is it important, and how does someone start doing that in a business which is fairly established now?
yeah. So I think the first thing I wanted to kind of clarify, innovation is not invention, right? So it doesn't mean that, oh, I know I can't be innovative because I can't think of something new. Coming out of something new is invention, right? So, and innovation it has so many definitions. I mean, so many ways of being innovative, right? You could be, iteratively adding to a particular product, right? It could also be removal, right? And innovation using removal is what Apple is great at. If you look at Apple, all the new products is removing something. They keep on removing stuff, right? So that's just to clarify. That's innovation. And normally what you do is innovation. You're trying to help someone. You're trying to improve, fix a problem, improve lives, right? Make it easy for communities or person and things like that. So that's first I wanted to get that cleared out of the way. So now that if from a company, a well-established company, I think our experience going into helping well-established companies obviously was with our program, our experience with the Sovereign Wealth Fund, that allowed us to work with their portfolio companies, which are all very, very large, multi-billion-dollar companies, right? And when you look at and during that period as well, we were very fortunate to collaborate also with GE. So GE in ASEAN, I think GE was one of the large corporations to embrace lean startup as a methodology. But when they brought it into GE, obviously they renamed it to FastWorks because Lean Startup and Lean
Right.
Six Sigma was so close and people get confused. So they said, okay, it's called FastWorks, right? And we got to see how big corporations embraced, this innovation thinking, startup culture, move fast, agile, come up with new things. And to me, a corporate really looks at innovation in two ways, right? It's either generating new wealth or new revenue, right? Or looking at innovation in terms of process efficiency and optimization. Generally, the companies are really interested in these two things, right? New money, or looking at how do I, improve my efficiency, operations, how do I save costs, how do I improve productivity of employees, etc., right? So I think those are, I think, generally how we worked also with some of the corporates, right? But what we did for our program with the corporates is, number one was just to introduce the culture and mindset of startup, innovation, entrepreneurial, things like that, which was very foreign to a lot of the companies that we went in. So for example, I think one engagement that we had with one of the companies, or the portfolio companies, it was a telco, and that telco was regional, and we had a project to go to 4 countries, right? and introduce this culture of fail fast, succeed faster, right? Because they had a internal company culture of fail to learn, right? So if you're not trying and experimenting, you're not learning, right? So just for us to go into every country like we did, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and Malaysia, right? Uh, failing not just on the corporate side, but even on a country culture like Bangladesh or Sri Lanka was you don't fail. Failure is
Yeah,
like
of course. Yeah. That's the
like
place where people get 100,
failure.
99% marks, and the dad's like, "Why didn't you get 100, son?"
Yeah, it's like you want me to embrace failure? Are you crazy? Right, right. So even just to get them to be innovative is to basically to reshape failure, right? Is to is to reprogram what does failure mean, and failure in a controlled environment, that means you are running an experiment and you're finding out that you're failing in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, right? And learning from it is what we deem as failure, right? It's not something that you work on for the last year and a half. You just blew a couple $1 million of your corporate budget, and then you figure out, oh, this is wrong and things like that. Obviously that kind of failure is not acceptable, but failure in controlled environments, short quick failure where you are learning and it's leading you to doing better and doing the right thing, is the kind of failure that we kind of like introduce into these companies, and also just to kind of like tackle the against even a country's culture or understanding of what failure is.
Okay, amazing. So what I wanted to ask you then, because I think innovation is a very interesting topic, and I like the way you're talking about it on the big corporate side, because you're right, the mindset's just not there for it. Um, I wanted to ask you, let's imagine that we have someone who's kind of like much smaller than that. Like, let's say someone, for example, has a something like a Quran program or something, right? Or they have a Quran app or something like that, like Muslim type of business, something small. They've had some traction, they've had some business. Like, should they be innovating? How would someone like that innovate?
Yeah, I think in those kind of so you could go in terms of, I guess you could go wide or you could go deep, right? In a sense where you can say, okay, I'm focused on the problem, or I'm focused on the customer segment. So, for example, if I'm tackling a problem of just getting, I'm tackling a problem of getting people to read more Quran, right? Then you could tackle the different customer segments or different types of people who read more Quran. You could be tackling problems of people who read Quran socially. You could tackle problems of people who want to read Quran as as a hafiz. You could tackle people who want to read Quran as maybe young kids. You could tackle problems who want to read Quran as older adults, right? So each of them will probably need different variations of a product suite, right? Because each of them has different, different, I guess, life lens, right? And different circumstances and what they need. So then you could go in deep into that. But I think then, but if you're saying that, I'm going to be focused on a particular customer segment. That means I'm going to be focused on serving Muslim women, right? Or Muslim working women. Then your product suite could be like, maybe it's just not reading Quran. Maybe it's about, I don't know, being a good Muslimah, right? Being a good Muslimah at work, things like that. So it could go out of Quran, right? It could go out of reading Quran. So that's how I would advise any kind of like Muslim startup right now, to kind of like, and we teach this as well, right? How do you kind of like grow your business? Are you problem centric or you customer centric, right? And that's a decision, because a lot of founders ask me, should I build a full suite of products everywhere and things like that? But if you have a strategy in terms of how you want to grow your business and what drives you, right, then that will also determine what problem you're going to solve, right? So you can have a variety of ways, and all this needs experimentation, right? You need to go in and experiment, and then you need to break down your customer segments and things like that. That, like I said, all these things have a methodology and a process in place, right? And it can make sense in terms of helps you navigate through the, I guess for founders, the 100 questions that you might have. What should I do next,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So like we can see that there's loads of experience, mashallah, tabarakallah, that you have. Like, tell me a little bit about like Andalus Ventures, right? Like, what is it? Why do you think it's needed? And what are you guys working on?
Yeah, so I think in my journey as well, I think when we were working with the Sovereign Wealth Fund and we kind of pivoted to this, right? And we started to obviously so alhamdulillah, when you get a bit of success, then even our Ministry of Higher Education approached us to say, okay, launch a program for all universities in Malaysia, right? 200 over university and higher education colleges and whatnot. And during that time, I think someone from another agency approached me and said, "Hey, Zafarul, can you take a look at the Islamic startup scene, right?" Which we were not really focusing on because I thought that they already had good players there and good government agencies there. They were tackling the problem. But when I started looking into it, then I saw a couple of in my mind, I would say I felt that Muslim founders were underserved, right? And I felt that Muslim startups did not get a level playing field in terms of funding and things like that. Because I mean, I obviously know some partners in funds and things, so I asked them, is it why don't you invest? Why don't you make some investments into Sharia compliant startups and Islamic startups? And they said, oh, yeah, being Sharia compliant adds an added hurdle, right? Added challenge to a particular startup, not necessarily giving more return. So investors are like, okay, why do I want the extra burden? But for us Muslims, it's great, right? It's obviously for as a ibadah, and you say, okay, this
Yeah.
is something that we want to do as Muslims, right? So I think that was the first thing that triggered me and said, oh wait a minute, there's problems in this the Islamic startup ecosystem, and and at the same time when I was looking into it as well, I also saw a great opportunity. Obviously everyone knows about a 2 billion population in the world. It's a $1 trillion market, and I felt that I felt that the timing also was great as an Islamic startup right now. Something that there's alhamdulillah, I guess we have to say a big thank you to the first movers in the Islamic startup scene, maybe like yourself as well, right? It's kind of like paved the way, and for us to come, right? And I think one thing that I realized as well, being in Malaysia, was also very strategic because we somehow, right? Uh, I don't know whether by design or just happens that we have a very interesting, Islamic Muslim brand that is, we're like I guess we're like the Switzerland of the world, and people just kind
Definitely.
of, yeah, people just it's Malaysian Islamic halal brand, like we're very neutral in that sense, right? And we're kind of like globally accepted. So I was thinking, okay, I'm in Malaysia, and this is a very strategic, location to kind of like build Islamic startups, right? So I think it was a combination of both, right? And obviously, last but not least, for me as well, it was a hijrah journey for me, as as I progress in my entrepreneurial journey. I always strive to make my business more halal, make my risk and everything more halal. Not just that, even our operations and how we how we go about our daily lives and routines in work, right? So I did not have a separation between work and ibadah, like like prayer, like okay, I go to Zohor, like I got to be good Muslim, and then I come out of the musalla, right? I'm like, all right, this
Let's
is
be a bad
you know
Muslim.
Shark Tank, right? This is
Yeah.
this is like, okay, man, you gotta kill some people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like in a business sense, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't have that separation, and we wanted to have this complete life as a Muslim. And the more and more we was in that journey, and I think it is obviously you can survive in the startup scene, right? As a Muslim, it's not ideal, right? But I think we wanted something more ideal for Muslim founders ourselves first, and also for other Muslim founders, right? So all those, I think, three came together. Problems that I kind of saw in the industry, opportunity in the Islamic global economy, and my personal journey as trying to be a better Muslim, trying to get the pleasure of Allah, right? And I guess I see this also as probably my final retirement project that I want to work on and retire. So, and yeah, what best? I mean, I really like where I am right now. It's my journey as to becoming a good Muslim and also taking my professional experience and expertise, right, and to put it together in one place. And that's really why those three things come together. Why we decided to launch Andalus Ventures sometime last year. Thinking about it, right? So it always happens in like Ramadan, right? Ramadan, you think about something, then you contemplate, and like, okay, we got to do something. The
Yeah.
next Ramadan, like, okay,
Let's do it now. So this is
let's do
very
it now.
interesting. I mean, I love the fact that you're kind of making this your worship and this is like your focus. And I love the connection that you guys are making between entrepreneurship and Muslims and Akhirah. This is all like really, really great stuff, mashallah. So fundamentally, like, what kind of projects do you see Andalus working on? What kind of things will you be doing? Who are the people you'll be supporting? What kind of projects will you be doing?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we worked on in Andalus is that Andalus Ventures is to look at what kind of startups that we wanted to work with, right? So, alhamdulillah, we had some amazing team members that reached out to us from all parts of the world, and we went on this, I would say task to kind of like shape what we feel the Islamic economy should look like, right? What kind of verticals that the Islamic economy should look like. And we found a balance, not just on market capitalism, right, or consumerism, but also looking at obviously, okay, what's going to be profitable, but also what's going to help the society and the ummah, and also how do we look at responsible usage of natural resources, right? And I think we also studied the Maqasid Sharia in terms of how do we apply the Maqasid Sharia into the business sense, and the kind of businesses and verticals that as a Muslim we need to be in, right? So for example, we looked like distribution of wealth, right? Not just on finance and fintech, but really on wealth, and how do we look at distribution of wealth, what kind of tools, what kind of products and services we wanted to put into the market that will help to, I guess, have better wealth distribution as well, right? Obviously, we studied things like food security, and I think the pandemic has showed us with regards to how fragile we are with food security, and maybe we're chasing too much tech and we forget about our food food resources, right? So I think those are some of the things that we kind of look at as well. How do we bring tech? How do we bring intelligence in terms of food security? I think I've also kind of like over the last couple of months looked at a couple of amazing startup ideas that looking at just improving the efficiency of a land or crop, right? In terms of crop production and things like that. Yeah. So and I think even in Islam, right? I mean, it's a religion that was put in for us to live in a society, right? So Allah in His wisdom knew that we as a community will be converging into cities, right? So how do we look in terms of building the cities for the future, looking at trends, what's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years, right? So for example, one startup that we're working with is actually in elderly care, because we looked at the trends that we as a world, as humankind, as our health, as our I would say our healthcare and our food, everything improves, the life expectancy increases, and
Mm.
surely we'll get into an old society, right? So how do we prepare for that? One of the startups that we do is looking into elderly care, looking into how do we then prevent all the diseases from happening in your elderly life, right? And when you're elderly, what kind of products and services that we want to kind of push out, right? To that. So those are the kind of examples, right? And I think you can go to the Andalus Ventures website, and you can look at some of the verticals that we kind of like talked about. Because I think coming back to my exposure and training with the programs that which we ran for the Sovereign Wealth Fund, that because it was Sovereign Wealth Fund, so fairness was important. So anyone with the idea couldn't be pushed away. So we had to entertain, right?
Yeah.
That gave us, from a program perspective, that gave us nightmares because we didn't know what startup we're going to be building
Yeah.
next. But what that did for us is it trained us to build practically any kind of startup
Okay.
that came through our door, right? If you ask me whether I want to do it again, I'll probably say no. Right? So
But
that's
it was
why.
worth the learning.
Yeah, but so that's why now there's a bit more structure. Okay, these are the areas that we're going to be building on and things like that. So inshallah, I think over the next couple of months, we will start to detail out a little bit more, come up with examples of startups. I mean, right now it's a quite big categories or verticals, but inshallah, in the next couple of months, we will like to kind of like zoom in and detail out. And I think, yeah, we've also launched our virtual startup generator program, and founders from anywhere can kind of like apply. We left it open right now. Because I think right now we also want to hear from startup founders out there what are the ideas or businesses that they want to kind of build or launch, and then after that, I think anyone that kind of closely matches the verticals that we're in, we probably have more conversations with them and see whether we actually take them on as our first batch.
Okay, that's wonderful. I think it'd be great for people to kind of get involved with you. With entrepreneurship, we've talked about a lot of the subjects that people would talk about normally, right? Like the lean startup and innovation and this and that. I want to ask you about the really big question that a lot of people care about, right? So I want you to tell me a little bit about funding, right? Because a lot of us, like obviously with the whole startup mentality, we've proven that you don't need cash to actually start an idea and stuff. But some businesses, they do require funding. They do need money to kind of really take it to that level. I mean, what's your tips, tricks, advice on getting funding and how do we kind of do it? Because you've been at the center of it with wealth funds and all these kind of things. So how does one go about trying to get funding?
Yeah. So the thing that I share with the founders and even people that talk to me, I always say that. So I hear from both sides, right? So I hear from both sides. So the investors, they complain about having no deals to invest in. Yeah. And
Okay.
then the startup founder says that I can't find any money. Investors don't want to
Mm.
invest. When investors say there's no deals to invest in, they say that there's no good deals to invest in.
Mm.
That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
So and if you talk to anyone in the investment side, they'll say there's too much money going around, and I just had a conversation just now with one potential investor. He's telling me to how some bigger investment companies have invested in lesser performing investment
Mm.
vehicles because they're desperate, right?
Yeah, to
They
find
know
something.
that, okay, to find something, to get some kind of return,
Mm.
they're desperate, right?
Yeah.
So my tip to startup founders is that knowing this information, you just need the key word is about traction, right? You build something that has that shows that people want to buy from you, that you're going to have customers buying from you, that going to customers using your app or using your product, right? You got to be able to demonstrate that, and once that's demonstrated, even the crappiest pitch deck, all right, will get you investors interested because the investors will see through that pitch deck, all right, and then see, okay, wow, he's got great traction, right? He's got amazing traction, and I think there was an example of I can't remember now. There was this app that used to schedule social media releases, and it's an example of they had the crappiest pitch deck, but they had one slide that showed that traction, and all the investors went goo goo gaga over, right? And
Yeah.
I've gone to pitch sessions where sometimes you have especially Japanese, Korean founders and everything. English isn't great; they barely speak English, but then they show one slide that shows traction, and then the investors understand Korean English, right? Broken Korean English, no issue, right? Obviously, if you're a great storyteller and you polish pitch deck, you could potentially also get funding because investors, okay, believe your story, can work with you and whatnot. But I think even I think in this COVID, especially in this pandemic era, and I've been talking and being in this an investor circle right now. Even now, the investors are coming back to basics even more. and they want to see traction. They want to see, okay, show me revenue now. Don't show me growth. I think before it's all about this whole, one thing about the startup thing is about slightly, sometimes I either agree or don't. I mean, maybe I disagree. Right? It's all about, okay, let's burn some cash. Let's spend on customer acquisition, right?
Yeah.
You could be, you could be cash flow negative, right? You could be losing money, but yeah, we're going for the big market. We're going for market share, and you raise a lot of money for customer acquisition. And you're just burning cash, right? So I think investors now are saying, okay, look, we're going to kind of be grounded a little bit more, and looking for that. So for any founders out there, really work on, really work on your customer development, really get first problem solution fit, and then product market fit, right? Work on those two things, and just get your startup hot and get traction, and you will have investors calling you, because there's a lack of good deals out there for investors to invest in. And the moment investors about a good deal, they're gonna be calling their friends, say, hey, you want to come in a deal with me? This is a great startup, right? News will spread, and you
So,
have
Zafar, like,
investors picking you.
something I want to ask you about this, because obviously someone like yourself, bro, mashallah, tabarakallah, like, you've been through it, you know so many people, right? But if I'm that young person who's taken your MVP advice, done something, got some traction, it's starting to look really, really great. I don't know anybody, right? Like, how on earth am I going to find someone? I've got a good pitch that I can even tell stories, but how am I going to get connected to someone who's going to have potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds?
Yeah. Okay, so my experience in US, in Silicon Valley, and my experience in UK, I think for me, US and UK has a pretty good ecosystem, in the sense where you have a lot of meetups that you can go to, and generally when you go to meetups, if you have something of value, and you pitch it to someone else, and you say, hey, can you help me? Can you introduce me to so and so and so? Right? I'm looking for this. They generally will help you. There's one thing good about the startup ecosystem, is that they have this culture of pay it forward, right? I think it's very Islamic in that sense, where based on merit, I'll listen to you. Okay, you've got something of value, and I'll help you out, right? And for no fee, just because I just want to help you out. I want to pay it forward, right? And we have this culture of pay it forward. So I think if a young kid or young first-time entrepreneur, you've got to network, you've got to get yourself out there, you've got to pitch to people, you've got to be first, have value, create value, of a great product, of a great service, of a great startup, and pitch it, and then ask for help, right? To say, hey, I'm looking to fundraise. Where do you think is the best place, right? Do you know anybody that you can introduce me to, right? Because more often than not, if in where you're at in the UK startup ecosystem, I remember when I was in London, I opened at meetup.com, and things like that, and every day, right? There's meetups every day, morning, lunch, night, right? And you got to get out there and hustle, and you got to get out there and meet people, and pitch and pitch and pitch and pitch, right? So,
Great.
and yeah.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very good suggestion. So you're basically saying that, look, because you have something of value, because you have some traction, just go and have lots and lots of conversations with people that you know, friends, family, those that know other people, and then you've got all these great things like meetups and all these other things. Just go and talk to as many people as you can, and basically something
Yeah.
will show up.
Yeah, yeah, I remember the story. The first time I landed in Silicon Valley, right, in the Bay Area. I can't remember where I was at, but I remember that it was in a coffee shop, and I paid for my coffee. I was waiting for my coffee, right, and then this guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, dude, how you doing?" Blah, blah, blah. And he just pitches his whole idea, right? He just pitches his
Wow.
whole idea,
He didn't know you or
right?
nothing, yeah?
Nope, didn't know me,
Okay.
and whatnot. So I was like, what is this guy doing, right? Why is he telling me all this stuff? And then I went back to my friends, and I'm like, oh, dude, he must have been practicing with you. He must have been like, he's probably going to pitch to an investor right now, and he used you as practice. He wanted to get some feedback from you, things like that, right? So yeah, so it just kind of shows that if you're new, go out there, pitch. Um, Again, I think because in a vibrant startup ecosystem, you've probably heard the idea many times. No one's going to take your idea and run away and execute it. If you find that guy executing your idea, he's probably been thinking about it anyway, right? uh, so don't be afraid about it. It's like a boomerang, right? You throw your idea out, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. By the time it comes back to you, it's like 10 times stronger, 10 times better. People heard about it. So just pitch your idea out, right? I think same thing as Andalus Ventures as well. When we had the idea, Andalus Ventures, we came out with the brand. I think the first thing that we did was we shared our story on social media. We said what we're going to do. We shared the idea of Andalus Ventures, and alhamdulillah, people reached out to us and said, "Hey, pretty amazing idea. How can we help you make it better? Let me give you some feedback. Hey, I want to work with you." All that kind of stuff, right? So just don't be shy and just go out and pitch.
Okay, amazing. So we're kind of fast running out of time, right? But I wanted to ask you something. Like, a lot of the kind of work you've been talking about is working with people, right? And a part of that is leadership. So I wanted to just get your kind of views, like with all your experience, what is leadership for you? What kind of like ideas do you have around that? Who are leaders that have inspired you?
So I think a lot of sometimes that's the thing, right? When you talk about leadership, so obviously I think over time you kind of understand. Sometimes as a leader, you almost like the best leaders are the best followers, right? The best leaders are the ones who empower people around you. You can be the best coordinator, right? So there's different kinds of leadership. So obviously, I think in this journey as well, I think when we wanted to start Andalus Ventures, uh, you know, obviously you read about leadership stories from you've got Simon Sinek's of the world, and you've got books on Jim Collins and all this leadership stuff, from all the major corporations, corporates that was built to last. I don't know whether they're still lasting right now after that book, right? And
Yeah.
you find all those leadership stories. But I think what I did personally was then I studied our Prophet, Rasulullah Sallam, right? His leadership techniques. I think he was the greatest leader of all times, right? Obviously when I looked at his leadership, traits and capability, mashallah, I try my best to kind of emulate or try to follow his lead. Obviously, I'm so far away from it, right? But really, and when you read his leadership traits, right, and how he led the ummah, and he was a leader everywhere, right? He was a leader at home. He was a leader to his community. He was a leader to the army. He was a leader as a businessman, right? So I and there's so many things like leading by doing. I think the first thing that I kind of like also emulate. So there's so many stories. Prophet ﷺ, when he wanted his companions to do something, he's like, okay, I'm going to do it first. I'm going to show you. I'm going to do it, and then you follow, right? So a lot of things that we do in Andalus Ventures, I say, okay, before we tell someone to do it, we do it, right? Before we tell someone to do it, we go into it, right? So I kind of like use a lot of those techniques as well, and a lot of things that I teach, I've done it, right? If I tell other startups to do it, I get my team to do it, right? I say, okay, we can't tell people to do something you don't do it, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I tell my team that, okay, that's how we lead. If we wanted to get the Muslim startups, to practice good, to use world-class methodologies like lean startup and how they build startups. We internally have to internalize it, and we have to do it, right? We have to master it. We have to go deep into it. Then when people see we do it, then we tell people to do it. Okay, can't say much, right? You're doing it yourself, Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
So yeah, I and what I do is I kind of map Prophet Sallam's leadership qualities and techniques to a lot of the modern day leaders, right? And I see a lot of it, right? I mean, I see a lot of similarities in how leaders have adopted some of his traits and being successful. And you can see if you study Prophet Sallam's leadership traits and you kind of map it against some of the best leaders out there in the world right now, you see his traits in bits and pieces, or as a whole, a lot of it in some of the great leaders out there lah, right? So to me, yeah, to me that's again, I can't stress enough. I think if any, I mean anyone, right, Muslim, non-Muslim as well, is looking for time-tested, proven leadership qualities and characteristics, right, and not fads, because otherwise, okay, this 5 years, this is how you be a good leader. The next 5 years is how you be a good leader, right? Something that was sent down to us 1,400 years ago and has has lasted the test of time. Just look at our Prophet Sallallahu.
Awesome. Excellent. Okay, wonderful. So I want to kind of like end by calling on one of your big strengths, which is resourcefulness, mashallah, right? I want you to just think about people who are looking to grow their business, grow their organizations, become great leaders. What are some of the like apps, tools, resources, books? What are the kind of things that you recommend a lot to people and that have really helped?
Okay, so like for number one, I think for me is that I can't stress enough to read, right? So you have to read. I think as Muslims as well, and our first ayat that was sent down is Iqra, right? Like read and all that, right? So that's number one. And for me personally, even when I was based in Silicon, I mean, I was traveling and everything like that. I had to find time to read, and I couldn't read when I was moving, and I kind of read slow, so I kind of have audiobooks downloaded, and I read them when I'm driving and everything like that, right? I mean, obviously, if I'm overseas, I'm on the train and things like that. So just using that time well, it's amazing how much books you can read or you can be read to, right? And information, right? And what happens is that once you listen to it, if there's any topic or a section that you wanted to revisit, you go in and say, okay, now I'm going to deep dive and just read this small portion. That has worked tremendously for me, and that has enabled me to read, quote unquote, more than 10 books a year, right? Sometimes 20 books a year, or sometimes I repeat some of the books, just to kind of refresh my memory. So obviously, I used a lot of Audible, right? And the great thing about Audible is you put it in your pocket and then you can pause it and play. If you use YouTube, you put it in your pocket and then it gets messed up and then you lose,
It's not the same. Yeah.
it's not the same, right? It's
Yeah.
not the same. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of tricks as well, is that I used to have, I put my entire business on the cloud. So I run my entire business on the cloud, everything from HR, finance, to operations, you name it, right? I used to have this my old laptop in my bag, with all my stickers and all my different chargers of the world and all my ready to go. My passport's in my bag, right? I'm
Yeah.
ready to jet set anywhere, and I could be running my business from airports and things like that. So, and it's you just have to experiment and get your business, kind of like on the cloud. And when it's on the cloud, you can have a lot of apps kind of sync into each other, right? You can sync up, like, so for example, your CRM, your database, and your accounting software, your customer information is using one because you're synced up, both apps. So those kind of help with regards to having a smooth transition with regard, smooth operations with regards to managing customers and managing operations and finance and whatnot. So some of the tools, obviously we use a lot of Google Docs. None of our docs are, and any founder right now, I mean, anyone out there, he still uses, Microsoft Word on your laptop, and
Yeah.
you're still thinking about, oh, I need to save my doc, I'm worried I'm gonna lose my version, right? I mean, I haven't thought about saving stuff for I don't know, 5 6 years. I
Oh,
this is
actually a very great point, bro. Like, in the
Yeah,
days we used to press file, save, or save as,
yeah,
right? It's so
yeah.
true. Someone sent me a PowerPoint the other day. I was doing this workshop for someone. They sent me a PowerPoint of slides, and I was a bit confused. Just for a second, my brain just fuzzed a little bit. Like, hey, what? Like, I have to download this and then I have to upload it into my presentation. So, okay, amazing. That's a good suggestion. That if you're not on
Yeah,
Google Docs right now, like, you need to sort it out.
Yeah, I mean now obviously you have Microsoft 365, and even you have the app, Apple suite of Keynote pages and numbers also on cloud, right? But that just get your entire team to collaborate on a docs like that, right? So you're all working on a particular, you can work together, you can synchronize working together on the same doc. You don't have to worry about saving everything. You don't have to worry. You can always roll back versions and whatnot. So I think those are some, I would say, efficiency tools that you need to kind of like get used to. And yeah, I mean, there's some general stuff. And right now there's so much content online. You can upskill yourself, right? If like I I think when we started our startup program, our pre-accelerator program, I mean maybe now 5 years ago, we had to come up with content because there were not much. But now after the last couple of years, we just stopped doing content. We just started curating content because there's so much content already, created out there. If you wanted to build a startup, right now, if you just have to be a little bit resourceful, go online, search for stuff. You can't go wrong. You're gonna bump into lean startup. You're gonna bump into agile. You're gonna bump into design thinking. Design sprint by Google, this and that. OKRs. You're gonna bump into all of these things. You know. And it's something that you can what I would recommend in terms of productivity hacks and tools and whatnot. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay,
Did I
amazing.
miss anything? Is there anything that you
No,
guys
no, no.
use that?
I think you've captured it really good, and I think like obviously, like you said, with all of these things, there's lots of things that can fit in. Like there's Trello, there's Slack, there's Zapier, all these kind of. It just makes it possible, and I think what I love about that is it really, really is important considering Corona, considering remote working, all this kind of stuff. Like, I know companies that are still running Microsoft Exchange servers for emails. It's like crazy,
Really?
but yeah, but like this is the reality we're in. So I think anyone who's looking to come to market now, I think you're absolutely right that they need to be really thinking like that. So that's wonderful, really, really great. Zafarul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today, man. I really, really appreciate you coming on. Jazakallah khair for all the
Thank you.
wonderful advice and the time. And, I know that you've really played your part in helping other people to really be great, inshallah. So thank you so much for being here, bro. Jazakallah khair.
Most welcome. Thanks for having me. I hope that your audience finds some of the stuff we talked about useful, right? And yeah, inshallah, anytime you want me to come again and share more
Definitely.
stuff, be more than happy to.
Excellent. Jazakallah khair. Brothers and sisters, this is the Muslim CEO Show. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. There's so many great things that we went through, especially related to startups, related to business, entrepreneurship. So definitely you guys should be taking notes, you should be implementing the kind of stuff we said. If there's only one thing you take away from this today, is that you can implement your idea within 3 to 5 days. So you need to go, take action. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and check out our free training at muslimceo.com. And of course, go over to Andalus Ventures and check out what they're doing. Jazakallah khair, guys, for watching, and inshallah, I'll see you on the next one.